Good afternoon, my beautiful people, and sorry for my voice. As you can hear, it got me. It, I'm not a silent person and never was, and yeah. But aside from my voice, I would like to talk to you today about the story of Frostpunk 2 and how we changed our engine and all the funny and not so funny stuff that happened during the development. And who am I? My name is Aleksander Kauch. I am senior technology lead right now, but I worked in 11-bit studios for like 15 years. Starting with the Anomaly, where I was gameplay programmer. With Anomaly 2, I was also a gameplay programmer. In Funky Smugglers, I was a gameplay programmer, but the only one this time. In This War of Mine, I was a gameplay programmer. And then I was programming lead in Frostpunk, and right now for Frostpunk 2, I am senior technology lead. I've moved more towards the engine than the actual gameplay features. And today I would like to take you for a journey how we went from this into this. So, starting with what is Frostpunk. Frostpunk is a game that was released in 2018. It was made using Liquid Engine, our own inside tech. And it was made by roughly 40 people. So the team wasn't that big. And it took us 3 years to deliver the first Frostpunk. Frostpunk 2 was released this year. It was made using Unreal Engine version 5.2. It was made by roughly 80 people, so double the numbers. And it took us 5 years of development. And there was a lot of changes during the production of Frostpunk 2. And the whole point is that change is constant and you must adapt to it and inherit it. But you need to make a game in the process and release it. So let's start with the engine. Our beloved engine, Liquid Engine, was used to create all of 11-bit Studios games: Anomaly 1, Funky Smugglers, Sleepwalker's Journey, Anomaly 2, Anomaly Defenders, and enough of Anomaly, This War of Mine, Frostpunk, and that's it. It was our internal tech written from scratch in 11-bit Studios. It was multi-platform, very multi-platform. At some point, when I opened the fridge, I was wondering whether I find Anomaly there or not, because it was ported to everything, every single, like watches, maybe Anomaly on watches, why not? So it was very multi-platform. It was multiplayer-ish. We've made a multiplayer component for Anomaly 2. It was great, but nobody played it. But the engine itself was kind of ready for multiplayer. I wouldn't call it multiplayer engine, but you know, when you have inside tech, you can write everything, right? It was ETS based in its latest form, so we've used Entity Component System, and it was very hard to use it daily. It was clunky, it had rough edges, and it looked like that. This is Liquid Engine in its final and terminal form. So, we started Frostpunk 2 in late 2019. We've had the team ready, we've had the engine, we've had all the morale, so let's go, let's make a game. So, we started prototyping, iterating, developing, implementing, and crashing. A lot of crashing. The engine was very unstable. It was in not a good state. So the reasons why this happens was that we were making 3 games at 11-bit Studios, and the engine had to be prepared for all 3 of them. You know, Frostpunk, I can't say about other projects, but when you look at the Alters, for example, which also intended to use Liquid Engine, it is a very different game. So features for different projects in our studio weren't compatible. I mean, we had to invest time in, for example, animation system, which Frostpunk don't utilize, but still we got bugs from this system. So it was too many features at once. Liquid had a fresh UI refactor, like rework. We went for Qt, and of course it was better and it worked, but a whole new spectrum of bugs was introduced with the new UI. We've had 5 engine programmers, so it wasn't that we had a big team to support the engine. And when a lot of people, like these 40 people that make Frostpunk 1, started to work on that engine, a whole new spectrum of problems occurred, because the more people use that engine, the more features are used, the harder it is to keep up with the updates. If you have 5 people, then they can wait for an update and you can focus on helping those 5 people. When you have 40 people, it's not that possible, especially with so little programmers. So the frustration grew. And we needed a quick solution for that, because we needed to create a Frostpunk2 prototype and present the game idea to the board and get accepted. So if you need a quick solution, you need Unity. So we split our team, and we've had Unity team that could prototype, iterate, develop, and implement. And we had Liquid Engine team that had other goals. The first goal was to fix the engine, to make it actually worthwhile, and then to implement the features that were already iterated by Unity team to prove that the engine can be used. And of course, create missing tools that were needed for the game. So once again, all hyped up, we started working. And it was early 2020, and you know what happened in early 2020? COVID happened. So our work looked more like that. But we did create 2 demos. The first one was the Liquid demo. It was called Tech Demo, and this is how it looked like. And you know, I know it looks like not good, let's say, but we didn't have any graphics artists in the project in that tech demo. So this is programmers art. All programmers are great artists, as you can see, but it was playable, and you actually could place districts. You could actually have economy there and UI there. And we created another demo on Unity, a prototype called Mood Demo. And as you can see, they had the artists. And the point of that demo was to show how the game should feel in our minds, like the first vision. It was also playable, it was very pretty, and it showed almost every feature that you might know from the actual Frostpunk2 game. So the problem was that we needed to decide what engine we want to use. And Liquid Engine was proved by that tech demo that the progress still was too slow. It was hard to quickly iterate on features, even when you had all the programmers on the board, and even with the features already tested in Unity. It was still too slow. The engine was missing tools. I mean, there were a lot of tools there, but often they were written in code. You could use that, but they didn't have UI to actually utilize them. It still had stability issues. We fixed most of them, but you know, if you introduce a new widget for the engine, you introduce a new bug, a new crash, and so on and so on. And the problem with in-house engine is that people don't really accept programmers. People don't really want to work with you, because if you're an artist, you prefer to get better in Unreal than learning a new tool that is custom for this specific company, because when you leave that company, all the knowledge, everyday knowledge of the tool is useless. So there were recruiting issues with using in-house engine. And of course, we didn't have time to develop the engine first and then go into developing the game. We had to do both. So the lesson from that is that in our case, trying to create a good for everyone technology engine proved to be impossible. In my personal opinion, if we would say to ourselves that Liquid Engine is the engine for Frostpunk2, for strategy games in general, we would probably make the game on that engine. But we wanted to create a tech for everyone, for every kind of game, and it proved to be impossible, at least in our case. So our beloved Liquid Engine is now gone. It was a fine engine, but still, we had to decide what to do with the game. So there were two engines that you probably know, and the battle royale between them. So we created a list of evaluation guidelines. What do we want to evaluate in each of these engines, and decide what are we going to do. So the first point is feasibility, whether the engine has all the features that we need to create a game like Frostpunk2. How do they perform? Does the engine support the platforms that we want to be released in? The second thing is art fidelity. Can the engine create a pretty art that meet our goals? How is the engine architecture? How is the engine organization? How does it handle assets and code? And our own tech team experience and attitudes toward the engine, because in the beginning of development, the tech team, our programmers needed to move into that engine and start developing features. And the goal of that was that we didn't want to end up here. So unfinished game, whatever the engine is. And I would like to tell you about how we evaluated both engines, and a huge disclaimer, this is a subjective opinion. I don't want to judge the engine. I'm talking about our cases and our view on that. It's not like objective truth. So in terms of feasibility, both engines, of course, have all the features that we need. They are commercial engines. They are really huge machines to create games. Of course, they have all the tools that we need. Of course, they support every single platform that you can imagine. Maybe back then Unreal was a little bit behind because Unity was more into like porting on mobile, for example. But Unreal right now, of course, it's also there. The performance of the engine and the optimization of the code itself seemed better in Unreal, and that proved to be very true with the release of Cities Skylines 2, where they had huge problems with optimization. So our assumption that in Unreal it seems to be better was proven to be very, very true. Both engines support platforms, I said, and both engines are extendable by plugins. You can create, broaden the amount of tools they have by using plugins. And Unreal had another advantage. The source code of the engine was available right out of the box. If you sign a deal with Epic, you get the source code of the engine. With Unity, I don't know how it looks like right now, but back then you had to have a special deal to get the source code of the engine, and that was a huge disadvantage in Unity. But on the other hand, if you look at list of similar games, strategy games, the list for Unity is quite good. You've got Homeworld. This is from 2020, back 5 years, the game's released with similar idea. I know there's more, but I stuck with the big titles. So you have Homeworld, you have Worlds of Magic, you have Endless Space Series, 2 Points Hospital, Battletech. You know, there's a lot of strategy games made using Unity, and not so much with Unreal. But on the other hand, these titles are bigger. You've got XCOM, you've got Might and Magic Heroes 7. Not that it was a good game, but still a big title. You have our Polish Ancestors Legacy, Tropico, Battlefleet Gothic series. So the titles themselves are bigger, more fleshed out. They are made in Unreal, but in general, more strategy games come out on Unity than on Unreal. And that's because what we know now that Unreal is not really suited for strategy games, especially UI heavy. Tomorrow there will be a talk about UI must not fall, and basically Unreal UI system is suited for displaying HP and armor and what weapons you're using, not really like hundreds of different windows for every building you have in the game. So we went to evaluation of art fidelity, whether the engine can support the art goals that we had. And of course, Unreal invested a lot of time and effort to make their games pretty. And Unreal Engine 5 was in the horizon, and it was before the whole Matrix demo, but still Unreal Engine games were definitely looked better. And Unity, on the other hand, still in the minds of at least our team, and I think more people in the industry, Unity is perceived as an engine for mobile games. And this creates a strange problem, because if you look for experienced artists, for example, mainly artists, you can find more of them working on Unreal than in Unity. So Unity had proved to have problems with getting actual people that could make our game look pretty and use the tools. And we searched for the best looking games, and there was almost none made with Unity. Most of them were made using Unreal. And our art director even went as far as to say that he can see the Unity look of Unity games, and with Unreal it's easier to make them look different. So yeah, the art team was already in Unreal Engine. With the architecture, from my experience with Unity, it's very easy to get a messy project and to have assets all over the place, unorganized. It's easier to do that in Unity. In Unreal, it is more. It's not that easy to have assets all over the place. I forgot the word, whatever. You know what I mean. For us, C# was harder to use than Unreal Blueprints. With Blueprints, non-programmers could use the blocks and they understood what is happening. With C#, the scripting language in Unity, it was harder. It was still code, and probably we would have to utilize programmers there. None of them had ECS that we wanted to use. So right now Unity has already Entitas, I think, and Unreal is also getting into that, but 4 years ago both of them didn't really have any ECS systems. Unreal also provided more tools around the engine, like Gauntlet for automated tests, like support for Perforce, UGS, build systems. There were more tools that we could use to speed up our development process than in Unity. And of course, both engines have a problem with legacy code and other features development. I don't know if any of you ever searched the Unreal Engine for a word hack, and it occurs 1,000 times in the engine. So yeah, there is a legacy code, there are some hacks with both of these technologies. In case of our team's experience, we've had a lot of experienced C++ programmers. we used C++ in Liquid Engine, and we wanted to maintain that. We decided to do most of the implementation in the code, so not using scripts or blueprints. The core gameplay, we wanted to keep that in the C++ code. Some of us had experience in Unity, me included. I made a game in Unity, and some of us also did that. With Unreal, it was Terra Incognita. But on the other hand, two other projects in 11-bit studios already used Unreal, and they had their experience, so we could utilize that and capitalize on it. And of course, as I said, the art team was strongly convinced towards Unreal. My own team, the gameplay team, was divided almost evenly. By that I mean some of them were leaning towards Unreal, some of them were leaning towards Unity, and some of them didn't really care. So, in early 2021, we made that decision. Almost 1.5 years into the project. And we chose Unreal Engine. Unreal Engine. And our struggle began. So, we have a new engine. Awesome. How do I make a game in that engine? It wasn't really easy because we've had 40 people with little to no knowledge on Unreal. They were divided by specializations, features, teams. There were some remaining divisions from Frostpunk2, and their mindset was all over the place. Project already was kind of out of schedule. Of course, our board understood that we need to change the engine, so we've had the time. But still, it was like we are 1.5 years into the project, and we've got demo on another engine. It was hard, and we've got people that were leaning towards Unity because they just made a game on Unity. The first prototype of Frostpunk was on Unity. And the Liquid team morale was really, really low because we've had, I was on that team also, we've had a taste of failure with Liquid Engine, and there were problems in the process of changing the engine that I don't want to get into, but we've lost a few good people back then, and my heart is crying up to this day. But the morale wasn't really great in that team. And last but not least, there was pandemics going around, so we stayed at home and tried to create the game with remote work. And I can name all other problems that we had in the company. There was a new idea, DevOps, in the project. We've switched from SVN to Perforce. We've reworked all the idea about quality assurance, how it should work, what is the purpose of that team, and what people do we need. We changed the production methodology because you can't use Scrum with 40 people, so we went to Nexus. We wondered what does it mean to be an engine programmer in the new engine, and I could go on, but I'll just stop there. So our solution was to split the team again. The Unity team was finishing. Yeah, we chose Unreal, and we still had the Unity team. They were polishing the demo to be shown for business purposes to our partners, and the board. And after they finished, they would join the rest of the team, and the rest of the team needed to learn how to make games on Unreal. And how do you learn to make games? By making games. So we made a game jam with Unreal. The game jam was, of course, as always, very fun, but it had some guidelines. There were 3 separate teams: the narrative team, the gameplay team, and the environment team. So all the artists, of course, were in the environment team. The only goal of that game jam was to learn how to use Unreal Engine. It lasted for 3 weeks or a month, something like that. We had to research the code architecture, how to manage the assets, how to maintain the project, how to create the project in Unreal Engine. and learn all the tools and plugins that we can, divided by those 3 specialization. And something that boosted actually the morale, so creating a first game on Unreal Engine. So we've had Frostpunk murder mystery narrative game. We've had Attack on Titan beauty corner, and we've had a city building game. And in the meantime, we had a dating simulator in Frostpunk, which was my favorite, of course. So the actual production of Frostpunk2 started somewhere in 2021. We're already 2 years into the project, almost, and we've developed a love-hate relationship with the engine. And the result of our research was that we, of course, had to start working, but we developed a few core principles on how do we want to make a game in Unreal. So we decided, after making 3 very different games in Unreal, game jam games, we've decided that, yeah, we do want to keep the game logic in C++. We do want to use blueprints as little as possible. They are awesome for prototyping, but in the actual product, we wanted to keep them in the UI system and in a game flow system like quests and narrative parts of the game. We wanted to use data-driven architecture, so the assets decide what elements of the gameplay mechanics are used. We did that in Frostpunk. We wanted to maintain that. We still wanted to use ECS architecture because it's very good, in our opinion, it's very good for strategy games. So, and our tech people knew that architecture, so we wanted to maintain that. We decided that we don't want to modify the engine itself, to keep it intact, so build up on the engine and not get into the engine code, because we didn't know that very well. And we wanted to capitalize on whatever the engine already had. We didn't want to write another engine aside of Unreal. 1 year later, there's a movie here. So yeah, what felt like one eternity later, we came up with the results of that, whether the principles actually made sense that we started developing. So, game logic kept in C++ was a very good decision, actually, because we, of course, had a lot of experienced C++ programmers, and you can't really merge blueprints. If you try to do that, no, just assume you can't do that. And it's very hard to review actual blueprints. It's easier to do that in the code. And of course, designers could still prototype quickly in blueprints, but that of course needed to be then transferred to C++, and that's something that we didn't manage to do in every cases. So we still have some logic in blueprints, but there is not that many cases of that. All the core features of the game are in hard C++. Keeping the blueprints where they shine in UI and game flow narration is an awesome idea that we can implement in the next game. Because, yeah, it actually proved, in our experience of Frostpunk2, proved to be a great idea to keep the blueprints there, but it still needed programmers to maintain. We didn't, and still we don't have technical designers actually capable of making features in blueprints. We have them in the making. We try to use more and more of good tech people, and some of them are sitting in the front row making fun of me. But I don't think we're already there with this blueprint skills. So it went so-so. With data-driven architecture, it needed a lot of research on how do we want to approach keeping data and organizing the project in Unreal. The main problem was whether we want to use data assets or data table, data assets 1. And we have a lot of them, like hundreds of data assets used all over the place. And of course, the idea of keeping the game in the data is rock solid. I would die for that idea, but it created problems with maintaining those data assets that were all over the place. Every skill, every building required a lot of data assets, and getting an overview on them was really hard and needed a few tools, a few additional tools that we needed to create. Data tables seemed better for those purposes, for getting the overview of everything, but I think that in Unreal Engine data tables are underdeveloped and they are harder to use in blueprints, harder to use in the code than data assets. So we went data assets way. It works. When the game is released, of course it works. So yeah, but it's harder to maintain for designers. We used ECS architecture. Some of you might know that I like it. I had like 3 talks about it during past years on Git. But it suits the game and it suits the team. We've made Frostpunk1 with ECS, and people knew that, people knew how to work with that, and in case of strategy games, it just works, citing the best developer in the world. We've got problems. Well, what do we want to use for the actual systems part of ECS? It was actors versus subsystems. We chose subsystems. It, of course, required a lot of research and a lot of consulting with maybe not random people, but with people with more experience in Unreal. So this was a hard decision. We went the subsystems way, and it proved to be actually hard to properly get into the initialization process of Unreal and getting the subsystems initialized in order, and they, after actors, they needed updates. We have a lot of code during the Unreal initialization, and it's the part of code that don't touch because we break. So as long as it works, don't touch. But all in all, it went fine, and this architecture was understandable for us and kind of easy to use, quote unquote. we wanted to minimize the changes in Unreal, which was the best decision in the world, because the more changes you make in the engine, the harder it gets to update the engine when Epic releases a new version, of course. We started with actually not 4.2, it was 4.26, I think. It's the spelling error, sorry. And we ended with 5.2 engine version. And we updated the engine like 4 times, I think, during the development. And we tried to cherry pick the changes, especially the newest one, like features from 5.3. We wanted to include that in the game, but that proved to be impossible because of the dependencies between features that are introduced in, for example, 5.3 version. It's hard to actually cherry pick what you want. It's generally you have to update the engine itself, and updating the engine took us from 2 weeks to 2 months, and you don't really know before you start how long would it take. So it's not something that you want to do like every week. So this decision led us to create an overlay over the engine. So the engine works by itself, and we kind of built upon it. That was the initial idea, and that was what we ended up with. We have like our game over the Unreal Engine, and I think it's fine. At least it works for us. Still, not touching Unreal Engine, not changing the engine code was the best decision ever. Of course, we do have some changes made, some bugs fixed, or things that work in a different way. But with every change introduced into the engine, we think, is it worth it to do so? Because the merging of a new version would get longer and longer. So we still don't really want to do that. And we wanted to capitalize on what is existing in the engine. It is a commercial engine, so everything should be there. We kind of had to, using that engine. It proved to be okay. I mean, what Unreal said about what they have is mostly true. But for example, platform support is not a fun place because it's all over the place. You have online subsystems for like every major platform, but some of them are not even implemented, and this goes with some other features of Unreal. The UI system is a mess. As I said, this is a UI suited for Quake, not for strategy game. So using the UI system of Unreal is... Come tomorrow for Krzysiu's talk. He is funnier than me, so yeah. Unreal also has a lot of old code. You can find code that dates back to, I think, the first Unreal, or at least the first Unreal tournament. So yeah, some of that is very old, and some of the problems aren't fixed that quickly. And from my experience, if the feature is in Fortnite, then it will be developed. If it's not in Fortnite, then it would be forgotten. So yeah. But on the other hand, the support is really cool, and there is a therapy group called Unreal Developers Network. And when you ask questions there, you can have Epic representatives to answer you, or the community itself. So that therapy groups work just fine. And so the takeout from this is just don't take anything for granted. Check if it works. Even if Unreal says it works, double check it, because there might be problems. But in the end, we did it. We made a game, and it is quite a fine game. I think a lot of people enjoying it, especially reviewers. So yeah, it went out fine. Thank you very much.
Hi, great presentation. I have a question about transitioning from Unreal Engine 4 to Unreal Engine 5, because I've heard many stories about changing the engine from 4 to 5. And how was the story for you in that case?
It was 3 months of work of actually one person that merged the engine. And then after the merging, we've had like 50 tasks to fix things with that change. So yeah, all in all, it took us half a year. But it wasn't that we could still work during that time, but there were bugs and problems introduced with the Engine 5 version, and the merging process was really tedious and slow, and we couldn't really split that among people because they needed to work on the game. So yeah, it was a huge leap, but all in all, the features introduced in Unreal Engine 5 like covered it all. So it was good decision, but took a lot of time.
First of all, thanks for the talk. My question is on the slides of things to figure out. You had the point of, okay, but like what does a dedicated engine programmer do in Unreal? So I would be really curious. So what did the dedicated engine programmers actually do in Unreal?
It won't be surprising, they are developing the engine. So what we actually do, I'm the lead of that team, is when I talked about the overlay over the engine. So this is the point where the engine programmers went. Some of them went for graphics programming, but the core programmers made, for example, save system, subsystems management, those initializations mechanics, support for all the platforms. So yeah, the usual stuff when you have a mature engine, the usual stuff that engine programmers do, they still do that. Unreal didn't change anything in that matter. So yeah, we don't implement gameplay features, we implement a platform that the gameplay features can be built upon.
So after you started playing with Unreal and Unity, have you have you like second guessing your decision and thinking, okay, maybe we should actually resurrect the Liquid engine?
I always want to resurrect Liquid Engine.
Yeah.
If you say, let's make a game on Liquid Engine, I think I have a few good people here that will go, yeah, let's do that. So, to be more serious, we wouldn't be able to finish that particular game in that time with Liquid Engine. So, and we wouldn't be able to have, for example, that experienced artist team that we have using Liquid Engine. So yeah, these problems, I think they are present in the whole industry, that the custom techs are in the decline. And we are not Civilization, which has custom tech. We are not Paradox, which has custom tech. We are just 11-bit studios. So yeah, we didn't second guess that we should make the Frostpunk2 on Liquid. We went Unreal all the way.
Hello, I have a question about the demo. Now that you know Unreal, would you go with a demo in Unreal, although Unity went so well, or?
We would go with Unreal for everything that we do, because if you make a demo, you can utilize the features you implemented from that demo in the whole game. And we intended to make the demo on Liquid Engine. It was like in its state impossible, so that's the only reason we picked Unity. Some of the people knew Unity. It was quick to enter and just do what you need to do. But right now, if we make a new demo of anything, it would be in Unreal, because we can reuse what we have from that demo.
Are you going to utilize those game jam games you've created? I mean, especially Dating Simulator. I think it would be great to release on Valentine's Day, for instance.
No, and to be honest, the screens that I've shown are in low resolution, because I couldn't even find builds of that game, and the repository that I downloaded wouldn't run because it was on vanilla Unreal and not our modified engine. So what I've shown here was from the presentation of those projects on a video. So no, we don't intend to develop that. It was fun. The dating simulator is very funny. Tadeusz, the love machine, forever in our hearts. But no, we are not going to release those games.
Such a shame.
We are not fun. We just make sad games.
Hi, thank you for the talk. I was just hoping to hear also something about the mod kit. How was the mod kit implemented as the part of the production cycle?
It was implemented and still is implemented. This is something very new for us. I mean, it's totally different perspective on making tools for modders. We really do want to do that, and with Unreal, it would be easier than with Liquid, but we wanted to do that in Liquid Engine. We actually did some modding tools for this war of mine in Liquid, but right now it's a huge exploration area, and there is a lot of places like that. Like every point of my presentation could turn into another presentation about that topic. So yeah, it's hard for us because it's new, and we don't really know how to do it properly, but we're getting there, and we have a huge support from modding community. I mean, the modding community is not that big, but those 5 people are really helping.
Thank you.
Hello, I got 2 questions. First one is, do you think there are any use for Liquid Engine in the future, or it's just a technology that buried and you won't touch it anymore? And the second question is, would you consider that it would be better for 11 bits to swap for Unreal Engine earlier, for earlier products, or not necessary?
So answering the first part, we do utilize Liquid Engine because the ideas we implemented there are great, and our hearts are still with that engine, but we use it like a code repository, and we just take what's there, what's already been figured out, and try to implement it in Unreal. And with the second part, I don't think that I personally perceive the burial of Liquid Engine as a failure, because if only we stuck with that engine for Frostpunk game and strategy games in general, I think we would be able to maintain the engine and have our own tech and our own twist on how the games are implemented. But and for the earlier projects, it was very convenient to use Liquid Engine. We've had all the control we want, and so no, I don't think that we should have go to Unreal earlier. And I think that the fact that this technology failed is somehow our failure as a company. But still, we make 5 games. It's not like we are a failure. It was just a series of bad decisions that led to the death of Liquid Engine.
Thank you.
You mentioned that one of the problems of Liquid was sharing tech between projects.
Yep.
Did Unreal help you with that? Like, are you sharing this overlay between projects?
If we imagine an engine that was suited for example, strategy game, and you want to do something like the Alters, so third-person view, you probably expect that some tools will be missing, and that was the problem. The time and effort went to implement those features for other projects than Frostpunk, and when we wanted to start implementing Frostpunk, we were missing features. Some of the time was already like invested, but in things that we couldn't really use. So yeah, it's the more kinds of games you want to support with your engine, the more different tools you need to make. So, yeah.
Thank you.
I've got a question about ECS, because I guess you implemented your own system back then, but would you change it to mass entity, if I remember correctly, that is called in Unreal, or what is your approach?
Well, definitely not in Frostpunk2, because it already has its architecture, for better or worse. But in the next game, if the ECS architecture would be valid, yes, I think we would at least research and probably go into mass entity or whatever the system will be in a few years.
Thank you very much.
So 2 quick questions. One, if you are like not directly using Liquid Engine, have you thought about open sourcing it just to, you know, keep it alive somehow? And then second question, I guess, if you're saying that Liquid Engine didn't support like third person and strategy games well, with Unreal, do you have like the base version that all of the projects use, or do you have like an Unreal version for like the altars, Unreal version for Frostpunk and all that?
To quickly answer the second question, yes, we do have separate engine versions, and yes, that will be a problem of my future self, whether to merge them or not merge them, and the decisions considering that. But yeah, right now we have the 3 separate engines, and with going open source with Liquid Engine, we thought about that, but there is nothing really to gain for us as a company, and there might be problems because, you know, it's our engine. The comments are there, and they are really like developers' humor in a lot of times. We've had memory manager that said in the first line of the comments, "Do not modify me. We are trained professionals and we know what to do." So yeah, no, because of those kind of things in the Liquid Engines code, we probably won't share it ever to open source. But it was a topic for us. Thank you very much for the questions. I'm glad that my sexy voice didn't kill you. Sorry about that. And if you want, you can catch me on the Gits territory. Thank you.